Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this very important discussion on global food security in a changing climate. We're here at the beautiful grounds of AfricaRice in Bouake, Côte d'Ivoire, one of the many CGIAR research centres across the world. We're delighted to be partnering with CGIAR, AfricaRice, and the African Development Bank. Today, 800 million people face hunger. 350 million of them are on the brink of starvation. And Africa bears the heavy burden of this. It accounts for 40% of global hunger, meaning that 1 in 5 people on the continent is food insecure. Climate change threatens to reduce agricultural productivity in Africa by up to 30% by the century's end. And yet, Africa holds 60% of the world's arable land. With the right investment, the potential is enormous. CGIAR, with 60 years of work across 33 African countries, has invested 450 million in agricultural science, and that's generated 250 billion in economic benefits. So that's the power of science-driven solutions. Today's panel explores how we can scale these kinds of innovations, linking research, policy, and community action to secure food for the future. I'd like to kick off with an interview with Dr. Clu Somado, lead for agriculture and agro-industry at the African Development Bank. Dr. Clu, if you could join me. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Susan.
So the world today is facing a lot of problems with financial recession, volatile food prices, and climate change. Where does the bank stand with the agriculture sector in Africa in this context?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I'm grateful to the CGI and the Financial Times for inviting the bank to this place. I'm very happy to stand in for Dr. Adesina, the president of the bank. You may want to know that he was even the lead economist of this center in the 90s. And also, this brings me also fond memories of this beautiful campus where I spent many years here. So thank you for welcoming here. Thank you, AfricaRice, for hosting this very important event. Coming to your question, you know, the African Development Bank, you know, is the premier development financial institution on the continent. And our goal is actually ensure that we have a viable economy system on the continent. And to have that, you know, our RMCs, there are 54 countries, RMC, regional member countries, and many of them, or the majority actually, as agriculture-led or agriculture-based economies. And you can't develop these economies without having focus on agriculture. That's what the bank has been trying to do. I've been over the past years. Then we have invested. Just for the, you may want to know that the bank has what we call a Feed Africa strategy. The Feed Africa strategy is an agenda to transform the agriculture sector in Africa to a very productive, but also that is brings to the farmers resources, incomes that increase their income and create jobs, actually, bringing in the private sector that actually lead the transformation of the agriculture with the government, the public sector enabling the whole system. Or you may want to know that we invested, when I say with the bank invested up to $8 billion US dollars over the past 8-9 years as a result of the implementation of this Feed Africa strategy in Africa. That's to tell you how committed the bank is when it comes to agriculture transformation on the continent.
Are there any other, coping strategies that the bank has in the current climate, and how are they impacting the agriculture sector and the transformation agenda in a context of climate change?
Yeah, Susan, you want to know that Africa, each year, lose between 7 to 15 billion to climate change effect in Africa. And it is projected that this will unfortunately increase by 2030 to 50 billion if nothing is done, if we just fold our hands. But the bank is not going to do that. What we did, for example, is we pledge to actually have at least 40% of our finance to climate finance. Last year, we even went beyond that as we spent 45% of our finance to adaptation, in Africa. And for mitigation, we even spent 67% of our finance for mitigation. You may even want to know, it's important to mention, AfricaRice also benefited from this support for adaptation. So we take it seriously, but Africa will need definitely to have roughly 2.7 billion US dollar, of course, to actually address this issue. But receiving only per year something around 30 billion US dollar. So the gap is huge. So we should come together. No one will do it alone. We need to partner with other organizations and appreciate this event that will give a very clear picture of what has been done and what we need to do and the gap that we need to fill.
That's
a
huge.
It is.
And in terms of filling that, do you need collaboration across Africa, or does it need to be broader even than that? And talk about global cooperation to fill that gap.
Yes, we mobilized 25 billion together with the Global Center on Adaptation to support what we call the Africa Acceleration Adaptation Program, actually what we did. And it's what we call, to support the program at the bank, we call Climate Smart Agriculture. That has helped actually finance two major multinational regional operations. The one in West Africa, we call the PDAC, the Program for Integrated Development of Climate Change in West Africa, for over 200, to be correct, 205 or 210 million. To cover the whole of West Africa and part of Central Africa, Chad, for example, along the Niger basin. That's roughly, I believe, roughly 4 million people will also benefit from that. In the Horn of Africa, you have a similar program, what we call Reform. Reform is also a resilience program to climate change for about 130 million that the bank has supported. Is ongoing in the Horn of Africa.
Why do you think the bank should be a knowledge institution as well as a financial institution in terms of agriculture research in Africa?
Yeah, the bank indeed is a knowledge institution. Unless you have knowledge about what you want to tackle, the woes of your you may invest, but unless you tackle the real issues at stake, you won't really and properly address them. So for us, it is important that together with our partners, CG centers, especially today with AfricaRice, we generate knowledge. The knowledge is key, actually, to any development program. You can go ahead and set up a development program without making sure that you have the knowledge of the issues at stake. And for you to address them properly, you need to have the knowledge of what it takes to solve the problem you are addressing. That's why it is important. And we've been financing activities along this line.
Final question before we invite the rest of the panelists to the stage, but what do you think is the potential for African agriculture with the right investment? What could we see in terms of the continent's productivity, the ability to feed itself, if the investment is there?
Oh, it will be fantastic. Let me just give you a quick example to share with you. At the bank, we call African Emergency Food Production Facility, for example, 1.5 billion US dollars, for example, that we invested in the wake of the Ukrainian crisis. no, we anticipated the global food crisis as a result of this crisis. Today, 47 RMC, regional countries benefited from that. Just let me give you the example of where we are in Côte d'Ivoire. We guarantee the access to seeds, certified seed, fertilizer of various value chains, including cassava, maize, rice, what. And maize, we provided, the bank supported the procurement of over 2,300 tons of certified seed, hybrid maize seeds. To tell you, production that's took off. Wow. For example, we were able to provide this seed and fertilizer to 11,000 beneficial farmers. That doubled their production from a maize crop from 1 to 2 ton to 8 tons per hectare, doubling the production of maize in the country to a record production of more than 660 million tons of maize in the country. Only because we target fertilizer, accessibility to fertilizer, affordable fertilizer at the right time, and also seed, without even touching other aspects like mechanization, water control, but making sure that the farmer has, at the right time, seeds, at the right time, fertilizer, apply them properly, we just double the productivity and also increase significantly production of maize in the country. That's what the potential of, any intervention in the agriculture sector that can bring about.
So there's a huge potential to increase yields in Africa.
Yeah.
And it sounds like fertilizer, but also seeds are really at the heart of that.
Yeah, correct.
Looking forward to hearing more from the rest of our panelists. Could I please invite to the stage Dr. Marie-Noël Dionjo, Head of Genetic Resources Unit and Manager, the Rice Biodiversity Centre for Africa, AfricaRice. Dr. Bouake Mane, Director General, AfricaRice. Thank you. And Dr. Aboudraman Bamba, Director of Research, Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, Côte d'Ivoire. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Vane, I think maybe if we start with you, it'd be great, to hear a little bit about what the threat is to Africa's food systems. What are the most urgent climate-related threats facing food systems in sub-Saharan Africa?
Thank you very much, Susanna. Of course, I want to really thank the Financial Times for having come to our Mbe research station to really allow us to share our experiences with regards to what needs to be done to be able to actually boost production of food in Africa under these challenging times. So more specifically, to come to your question, the climate challenges facing Africa actually, in order to be able to respond to that question better, we need to understand the context. Because in Africa, most of the food production is under rain-fed conditions. So it's only about 6%, less than 10% of all the agriculture in Africa which is irrigated. So that means the majority of the production is under rain-fed conditions, and now with climate change, all that food production systems are actually under risk. So this is a very serious situation. That's the reason why when we talk about climate change impacting very much the agriculture, the threat is much more higher in Africa because of the nature of our food production systems, which, like I mentioned, are mainly rain-fed. So on the present climate change conditions, we found out that, for example, the rainfall is highly unpredictable. The beginning of the rains and also the ending of the rains are highly unpredictable. And under such conditions, it's difficult for farmers to know what is the best time for them to plant. And also, they will plant, usually farmers have been used to planting long-duration varieties. They plant the long-duration varieties, and then all of a sudden, the rains will end very quickly. And then when that happens, you have a lot of crop failures and a lot of problems with our food production. We have seen that in many years across the continent here. Then also we have the problems of flooding also, because that's the dilemma with climate change. Some years you get drought, not enough rains, but sometimes you get also too much rain. And even a crop like rice, which also likes to have water. When there is too much water in the production system, even the rice itself will suffer. So we have had a situation whereby we are getting a lot of flooding in some of our rice areas where we have a lot of yield losses. And then climate change also, we have the high temperatures also. As we know, almost even in Europe, we have seen really high temperatures during periods when people are not accustomed to having high temperatures. In Africa also, high temperatures, more and more, we are having them impacting our food production, where the crops are not adapted to those extreme temperatures, and we get what we call the sterility. So plants actually find their productivity actually is reduced. The other side is even the salinity also, because as we know with climate change, we know we are going to be getting, as they say, the melting of the ice caps, and then when that happens, we have the water level in the coastal areas also will increase. And when that happens, you get the salt water from the oceans will also go more inland in some of your estuarine areas, and then you have a lot of flooding of your your river basins, and then the agricultural land in those areas very fertile, but then they get problems of salinity. So this is the reason why when we talk about climate change impacting agriculture is much more dire for Africa. And really our already challenged systems whereby African agriculture, the annual average yields are very low. A crop, for example, for rice, the average world yields are 4.6 tons per hectare. In Africa, we are only at 2.3 tons per hectare. And then added to that, you have this challenge of climate change. So that means we definitely have to try to boost the productivity under this much more complex situation now. Thank you.
So African agriculture is really on the front line of climate change, and more so than in other regions. You know, what role can science play and scientific innovations play in offering solutions? And you know, how do we tailor this to the African context, which, as you say, involves lower average yields than the global average, and also a greater role of smallholder farmers rather than the big farms that we might see, say, in Latin America or in the US. So what can science offer?
Thank you very much, Susanna. Science has a lot to play actually in this to try to actually increase the productivity of the systems under these challenging conditions. Because, like, for example, building resilience in the systems. Because also another part of the story in agriculture for Africa is that most of the agricultural lands in Africa, almost 60%, are degraded. So that means their capacity for high production over time is also lower. So this is the reason why we really need to have the science to be able to increase the productivity of those production systems through what we call the integrated production systems. So when you bring different approaches, different crops, and also different commodities in the same space, then you find the productivity will increase through increases in the fertility of the soil. So integrated production systems is very important for the science to be able to come out to say, how can you be able to combine different production systems so that the farmers have a diversified production, but at the same time also the environment of production is improved, and then the productivity will increase, and what they are getting from the land also will be able to address much more diverse effects. But also, as I mentioned, the resilience of the system is very important, because if the climate is changing, that means the conditions you have in the farmers' field today will not hold tomorrow. So that means you need to have new science to be able to have those techniques and also the technologies that can allow you to adapt those changing environments. So that's the reason why the role of science to be able to adapt African food production systems to increase their productivity, role of science is extremely crucial so that we can be able to make what we call shortcuts. Because, for example, a continent like Africa, we do not have time. It's very, very urgent that definitely we find solutions to be able to bolster food production over the next 5 years, because otherwise, when you look at the geopolitical situation, it's very, very challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Marie-Noëlle, I want to talk about gene banks, like Dr. Bouake mentioned. Well, firstly, maybe actually, if you could just explain to the audience what a gene bank is and why it's so important, and then let's talk about rice in particular. But firstly, maybe outline, you know, where does this all start?
Okay, thank you very much, Susanna. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here to participate to this panel discussion. So, coming back to your question about the importance of the gene bank. The gene bank are actually more than the repository. Most of the time, people look at the gene bank like a storages. No, the gene bank is more than that. The gene bank is a place where we preserve all the plant genetic resources that we have in the farmer field. We collect them, we characterize them, and we store them in the good condition. We manage them in the high standard to ensure that we can conserve them in perpetuity for this generation and for the future generation. So the gene bank has a major role to play to ensure that agriculture in the future will be able to continue, that people will be able to have food to feed the family. So this is why the gene bank is very important. We are collecting, we are conserving all the native crop that our farmers have been growing for years in their field. And in the context of this climate change, if we don't, because in the scientific world, what the farmers are keeping, we call it in situ conservation. So when the plants are in the field and then the flood occurs, then it will devastate all the plants. So this is why it's important to go and collect them and conserve them ex situ in the storage, so that if there is any disaster, we will bring back those materials to farmers so that they will continue to feed the world. So, and then there is also a major conservation strategy at the global level. You know that there is Svalbard, the global seed vault based in Norway. In collaboration, the CGIAR, in collaboration with the Crop Trust and the FAO, they have convinced the Norwegian government to invest in that vault, where we can secure millions and millions of all the crop that we have in the world there at the very little cost. You know that the storage are so expensive because they take advantage of the fact that they have ice. They are they are in the cold places.
Yes, yes.
So the cost of the energy is very low. So they are actually using that advantage to secure, to preserve all the seed and the seed of the plant that we have, so that in the future we can conserve them very well and feed the population.
So gene banks are essentially an insurance for global food security, not just African food security, but globally. But specifically about this region, it was mentioned earlier that 40% of the rice is imported, despite the capacity to produce here. Why is Africa's native rice diversity so important? And how can the gene bank be used to capitalize on that, and also to create climate resilient varieties that can help farmers here?
Yeah. Thank you for the question that you just raised. It's an important question. Because if you look at the CG, the way we are located, all the gene banks across the world, the way we are located, the CGIAR are located in the center of diversity of the crop for which they have the mandate. So AfricaRice is here because we have the rice mandate and the African rice. The center of diversity is in West Africa. So it's very important. It means what? It means that our first role is to preserve the native species which have been used by the farmer in the country, because those are vital assets for securing the food in the context of, in face of climate change. And then if you come back to rice, the Rice Biodiversity Center, we are the largest rice collection in Africa, whereby we have around 21,000 accessions. Those accessions belong to at least 3 native rice species. We call them in the scientific world Oryza glaberrima. It is actually African rice, which is one of the cultivated rice species. It's originated from West Africa, so they are native from this region. Then you also have Oryza baatai, which is the ancestor of glaberrima, which is also native from West Africa, and it's a wild rice. And then we have Oryza longistaminata, which is the perennial wild rice. Those native rice, why they evolve in the harsh environment that we have in Africa. They they have been growing in this environment. So they are naturally resistant to resilient and resistant to drought, resistant to salinity, to flood. They naturally have those resistant genes and resistant also to pests and diseases. Are you getting me?
So has the Africa's Gene Bank then had any measurable benefits for farmers and for food security here in this region?
Yes. So we use those native native species to develop improved varieties. One of the examples is New Rice for Africa. We developed a set of Arica, of course, Advanced Rice for Africa. New Nerica rice were developed also using gene bank accession. We also have the series of Beta and Sahel. Now, if you take the example of Nerica was developed by using accession from the gene bank, whereby we cross African rice and the Asia rice. They are the two cultivated rice species that we have in Africa. And Nerica was able to, now the Nerica has been grown on more than 2 million hectares across Africa. And in terms of impact, Nerica were developed, and now because they are disseminated, and we have the figure from the impact assessment that more than 8 million people were able to be removed from poverty and also food insecurity because of Nerica. And the productivity of Nerica in the farmer field is higher. Therefore, the farmers are having more income because they have a product that they can sell because of the yield. So we have so many examples like that. We have the example of rice yellow mottle virus. It's a disease which is endemic to Africa. When the disease occurs, the farmer will not be able to harvest any seed in his field. So it's a very dangerous virus. AfricaRice have been working in collaboration with the partner in the Advanced Research Institute to identify the genes. So can you imagine that only on the native crop that we call species called Glaberrima, 3 genes have been identified up to date. And more, I'm sure more and more will come. So those genes were identified, and we use those genes to improve the rice variety used by farmers. And we did it in collaboration with CORAF, and also it was funded by United States, and collaboration with CORAF and also our NAS, our partner, national partner, where the disease is present. So the product, we generate the product, and they have been disseminated in the country so that now the farmers are using it to in the places where the disease occurs. So you can see the benefit of, and there are 1,000 examples like this. Recently also, we were able to have a grant on the multi-harvest crop, whereby we are exploiting one of the important traits of one of the native rice species called Oryza longistaminata, because it's a perennial rice. So it had a very specific grow habit that gives the ability to farmer, this perenniality, give the ability to farmer to harvest the seed several times a year. So it reduced the labor, it reduced the cost of production. So these are the example I can take, just to show, a few examples just to showcase the importance of securing, preserving all the genetic resources that we have.
And I'm sure with greater investment, these examples would expand exponentially in terms of, and their impacts as well. I wanted to go back to the idea of the reliance on imports. Dr. Bamba, comment la Côte d'Ivoire travaille à réduire sa dépendance aux imports de riz et renforcer sa souveraineté alimentaire?
Merci pour la question. Et avant d'y répondre, je voudrais surtout vraiment remercier d'abord AfricaRice pour l'honneur qu'il me fait de participer à cette séance. Je voudrais aussi vous dire merci, parce que l'un des problèmes de la recherche en Afrique, c'est la communication. Et le défaut de communication rejaillit sur aussi le financement des projets de recherche et la valorisation des projets de recherche. beaucoup de projets restent dans les tiroirs par faute de financement. Ce n'est pas parce qu'ils ne sont pas pertinents, mais c'est parce que l'information n'a pas été portée où il faut. Donc, je vous remercie bien, Financial Times, d'être venu jusqu'à nous pour nous écouter et pour être notre porte-voix où cela sera nécessaire. Maintenant, par rapport à la Côte d'Ivoire, il faut savoir que la Côte d'Ivoire ne produit que 40% de ses besoins de riz. Et ce qui veut dire que la Côte d'Ivoire importe 60% de ses besoins de riz, malgré l'existence de nombreuses opportunités dans ce pays. Nous avons des bas-fonds, il y a une bonne pluviométrie, c'est la forêt, donc on devrait avoir une bonne production. Ces importations, il faut le dire, pèsent sur l'économie du pays. En effet, le ministre en charge de la promotion de la riziculture affirmait en 2019 que la Côte d'Ivoire dépensait plus de 3 milliards pour s'approvisionner en riz auprès des pays exportateurs. Maintenant, quelles sont les stratégies que la Côte d'Ivoire a développées pour faire face à cette dépendance en riz vis-à-vis de l'extérieur? D'abord, il y a les solutions scientifiques. Ensuite, il y a les solutions politiques. Au plan scientifique, la Côte d'Ivoire, pour répondre à ses besoins, a développé ce qu'on appelle des programmes nationaux de recherche. Ce sont des programmes transversaux à l'échelle nationale et qui sont censés répondre aux besoins en recherche des composantes de la société ivoirienne. Donc, pour résoudre le problème de la sécurité alimentaire et plus précisément pour réduire l'impact des changements climatiques sur la production, la Côte d'Ivoire, par le biais du ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la Recherche scientifique, a développé 2 programmes nationaux de recherche. Il y a un programme national de recherche qui s'appelle Changement climatique, activité anthropique et impact sur l'agriculture. Au niveau de ce programme, il y a un projet, et ce projet, il s'appelle donc Impact du changement climatique sur l'agriculture. Donc, quel est l'objectif de ce projet? Quel est l'objectif donc de ce projet? Donc, il s'agit d'améliorer l'adaptation de l'agriculture en Côte d'Ivoire face au changement climatique. De façon spécifique, il y a donc des objectifs spécifiques, et l'un des objectifs spécifiques, il s'agit d'analyser les conditions d'amélioration de la sécurité alimentaire pour assurer une production alimentaire stable et suffisante malgré les variations climatiques. Il s'agit d'apprécier comment réduire la pauvreté à travers l'augmentation de la productivité. Il s'agit d'identifier de nouveaux emplois dans le secteur agricole et les industries. Pour le deuxième programme national de recherche, c'est le programme qu'on appelle donc développement d'une agriculture de précision par l'intégration d'innovations technologiques, des sciences du numérique et spatiales. L'objectif de ce programme national de recherche, c'est de développer des outils technologiques appropriés, des services intelligents destinés aux producteurs pour une agriculture de précision. En effet, par rapport à ce programme national de recherche et à ce projet, il s'agit d'intégrer les technologies de l'information et de la communication et les applications du spatial dans les pratiques agricoles traditionnelles. Donc, on va utiliser les véhicules aériens sans pilote, l'analyse des données massives et l'apprentissage automatique. Mais pour ce faire, pour pouvoir mettre en œuvre ces 2 projets, on avait besoin de ce qu'on appelle en Côte d'Ivoire les moyens communautaires de recherche. Et ces moyens communautaires de recherche, il s'agit d'un centre de calcul intensif, il s'agit aussi d'un centre d'analyse, et on a même nourri le projet de mettre en place une agence spatiale. Donc ces moyens communautaires, on appelle ça moyens communautaires parce que ce sont des moyens de pointe qui sont censés être utilisés par plusieurs institutions de recherche. Donc, grâce à ces moyens, nous pouvons atteindre les objectifs que nous nous sommes assignés par rapport à ces 2 programmes nationaux de recherche et par rapport à ces 2 projets dont je viens de parler. Là, c'est ce qui est scientifique. Maintenant, au niveau politique, la Côte d'Ivoire a développé donc plusieurs politiques pour atteindre l'autosuffisance alimentaire. Au début, la Côte d'Ivoire était dans une logique dans une politique très interventionnelle, c'est-à-dire c'était du dirigisme. L'État voulait tout diriger. Ça n'a pas marché. Deuxième politique, libéralisme. On laisse tout on fait du libéralisme, mais ça n'a pas aussi résolu le problème de la dépendance vis-à-vis aux importations. Donc aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans une logique, dans une politique mixte entre un peu de dirigisme et un peu de libéralisme. Deuxième politique, la Côte d'Ivoire a défini ce qu'on appelle une stratégie nationale pour résoudre son problème de dépendance vis-à-vis des importations. Et cette stratégie, donc, il y a un budget qui a été développé pour mettre en œuvre cette stratégie.
Maybe this is a good moment just to pick up on that. You know, how this, in terms of the importation strategy, is there a role for ECOWAS or regional cooperation in terms of harmonizing rice policy and managing imports strategically to reduce the dependence not just of Côte d'Ivoire but also of West Africa? Whoever wants to answer, it's an open question.
Okay, I will just talk about maybe from my own side with regards to at the regional level what is being done. And then Professor Bamba also will complete to add to that question. Donc essentiellement, c'est au niveau régional, qu'est-ce qu'on est en train de faire pour coordonner la réponse pour atteindre l'autosuffisance alimentaire au niveau régional? Au
niveau régional, ben, l'existence même de AfricaRice est une réponse donc à ce problème qui est posé. Parce que AfricaRice, c'est 25 pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et centrale qui se retrouvent et qui partagent le même problème, c'est la difficulté pour couvrir leurs besoins en riz. Donc, ensemble, ils partagent leur expérience et ils développent ensemble des stratégies pour faire face à ce problème. C'est ce qui fait que déjà AfricaRice est une solution ou un moyen régional pour faire face à cette dépendance. Il y a aussi d'autres entités. Par exemple, vous avez les regroupements régionaux, vous avez la CEDEAO, on peut dire, qui, au niveau régional, a une politique aussi pour faire face à ce problème de sécurité alimentaire. Voilà, on peut citer ces 2 entités.
Right.
Voilà.
So it's not just rice. There's regional cooperation in terms of food security in general.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just for me to add a little bit to what Professor Banwa mentioned with regard to the regional initiatives, because this regional body called ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, actually they have launched what they call the ECOWAS Rice Offensive. So the idea behind that is actually to be able to attain rice self-sufficiency in the sub-region. All the West African states, initially the ambition was 2025. But as we know, we are already here in 2025, we are not there yet. So now the target has been revised now to 2030. So the ECOWAS Rice Offensive actually is one of the regional initiatives to really make sure that all our effort by the different countries, they are all geared towards how to coordinate and also be able to really synergize to make sure that regional production can be able to meet that are required almost 10 million tons of rice that is being imported into the sub-region. So we have the ECOWAS Rice Offensive as one of the tools, but also there is another organization that has been set up by ECOWAS, which is called the ECOWAS Rice Observatory. So that observatory actually is trying to coordinate all the investments in rice value chain across the West African region to be geared towards attaining rice self-sufficiency. And in that rice offensive, we find we have different partners with whom we are actually working. We have the financial partners, for example, we have our colleagues from the African Development Bank, which are actually one of the largest investors actually in the food sector in West Africa. There we have, for example, the bank has pledged actually $650 million in a project called, region-wide project called the Reward. So the Reward project is actually targeting the attainment of rice self-sufficiency within the West African region across all the 15 countries by 2028, latest 2030. So that target is very, very ambitious, mobilizing 650 million tons and to increase total productivity by, to be able up to about 10 million tons within that period. We have, of course, other partners also that are also working in these regional initiatives to make sure that we have the mobilization of the resources that are required that will enable us also be able to boost the production. The other policies also across the region are what we call the common tariffs. So ECOWAS that really has achieved a lot whereby all the countries, they were able to agree to really harmonize their tariffs so that it can promote trade across the sub-region. Because it's very important we talk about food self-sufficiency. The countries are so intertwined, it's not just one country at a time. So it's important to make sure that when there's a surplus from one country, at least it can flow easily to the other one. So that's the reason why that regional trade, to try to liberalize and open it up, is a very, very important achievement by ECOWAS. So there are other policies also, but then a lot of them also are really geared towards how to be able to mobilize resources into the food sector, but at the same time also do a better coordination of the efforts and also the harmony, and also harmonize the policies. Another policy also which was harmonized, there's a policy around the, the release of varieties. The release of varieties, the use of varieties, and also even for the agrochemicals that are being used, there are policies that are harmonized with regards to which agrochemicals can be used sustainably in the sub-region, but also how to make sure that when a crop variety is released in one country in the West African region, automatically farmers across the whole sub-region can have access. And this is really revolutionary, because that means across the countries, even though politically they have differences, we find out that farmers can be able to access latest technologies across the region once it is validated in one of the countries. So definitely those regional strategies that ECOWAS and other partners are actually promoting to be able to attain food self-sufficiency, they are very, very important. And, but like I mentioned, the financial partners are playing a very, very key role to be able to attain some of those objectives.
And on that, I want to come back to the solutions part of this, but just to talk about the financial partners. Obviously, the African Development Bank is a massive player in this. You know, how is the bank supporting investment in agricultural science and climate resilience in Africa?
Susanna, thank you for this. You know, it's very exciting when I hear Dr. Bouake and Dr. Marino talking about the breakthrough they have in their varietal improvement that has led to the increase in farmers, potential increase in farmer income. I'm thrilled knowing that the bank has made the key investment into the strategic areas of food system in West Africa. This journey started back in 1986, and the honeymoon lives on, and divorce is not in view. That means we started financing research organization in 1986, and those research organizations whose programs are relevant to Africa, of course, that, including AfricaRice, for example, and ICRISAT, you name it, ITA, you name it. And the support started from the bank administrative budget, using the bank administrative budget, and then going to what we call the TAF, the Technical Assistance Fund, and even going into the net income of the bank to finance research organizations in Africa. This place we were the main research center of the AfricaRice Center. Back in the 90s, 1991, we had a program that covers 5-6 years, 1991, 1996, 97. A program that financed to the tune of roughly 3 million UA that multiplied by 1.4, 1.5 to have it in US dollars. This center to actually set up this place, having to equip the labs, set up the field here. But also, more importantly, and Dr. Marie Noel said it, participate in the development of the Nerica varieties. Yeah. You know, the Nerica varieties is seen, still seen anyway, as a major breakthrough in the science of varietal improvement. So supporting the development of this Nerica variety that had a yield from less than 1 ton hectare, and you having on average 3 ton an hectare. In some countries, you may even have 4 in Mali or 5 even in Uganda. From less than 1 ton to 5 ton hectare, this Nerica variety has changed the whole food system, rice food system in West Africa, and we are very glad that we contributed. And we went even beyond that. What we did, we funded the dissemination of these technologies. What we do, how do we transform the agricultural food system in West Africa or in Africa as a whole? We ensure that we invest into research, into innovative research, into technologies, adapted technologies. It's the way we believe, the lesson we learn, investing into innovative research technology. And by doing that, we will recall this Nerica, we call it the NericaRice Dissemination Project. It's a project that was funded in 2005. A 5 years project. Actually is a multinational, regional project that covers 7 countries in West Africa to ensure that we disseminate these Nerica varieties across these countries. Susanna, at the end of the project, it was very clear through what we call the data, statistic, analysis, estimates that 35,000 people were lifted out of poverty as a result of this project. And even it was projected that by 2035, 1.5 billion of people will be lifted out of poverty as a result of this project. If the trend of Nerica seed varieties, the use of NericaRice variety, but also the adoption rate is maintained, will have lifted out of poverty 500,000 people. It's not only what we've been doing. We have what we call also the SRDC project. It's the acronym for support to research for development and to develop strategic crops, strategic commodities. That was also funded in 2013 to 2018 for 53 million units of account. That's something like $80 million that, and included AfricaRice Center, ITA, and ICARDA to develop cassava, rice, maize, and wheat value chains. And these projects was a successful success story in the whole of the continent. Yeah, please. I can keep on, because we've been.
Just because we're running out of time, I just wanted to look a bit to the future. So, an open question to all of you, but particularly maybe Dr. Bamba. I don't know if you want to respond to this. Comment les gouvernements peuvent collaborer avec les bailleurs de fonds pour déclencher et accélérer la transformation agricole?
Merci pour la question. Donc, je vous avais parlé de la nouvelle stratégie nationale de développement du riz qui couvre la période 2020-2030. Donc, cette stratégie prévoit la réhabilitation de 64 barrages et des parcelles rizicoles. Elle prévoit la production de semences à haut rendement et la mécanisation totale de la chaîne des valeurs rizicoles. Donc, la Côte d'Ivoire, pour retrouver sa souveraineté sur la production de cette denrée stratégique, le gouvernement ivoirien mise désormais sur l'industrialisation de la filière et l'engagement du secteur privé avec l'aide des partenaires étrangers. Donc l'Inde a été sollicitée. Le pays a ainsi renforcé le parc industriel. Une table ronde des partenaires techniques et financiers pour le financement de la stratégie nationale de développement de la filière a été organisée en juillet 2024 par le ministre en charge donc de l'agriculture. Cet événement majeur visait à mobiliser des ressources pour la mise en œuvre de la stratégie nationale de développement de la filière riz. Et cette réunion a vu la participation, par exemple, de M. Ousmane Diagana, qui est le vice-président de la Banque mondiale pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest et du Centre, et de nombreuses autorités étatiques. Le Premier ministre y est allé. Le Premier ministre qui a pris la parole donc, à cette rencontre a indiqué que le projet cher au président de la République était de s'inscrire dans la perspective de parvenir à court terme à l'autosuffisance alimentaire et à relever le défi de l'exportation. Il a été sollicité aussi des bailleurs de fonds, donc la Banque mondiale s'est proposée donc de soutenir la Côte d'Ivoire pour mettre en œuvre cette stratégie nationale pour la recherche sur le riz. Donc il y a l'Inde, il y a la BAD, et puis il y a la Banque mondiale qui s'est proposée, et puis d'autres bailleurs de fonds voilà, que j'ai cités. Donc l'objectif donc aujourd'hui, c'est de réduire la pénibilité du travail en vraiment mécanisant le travail et en industrialisant le travail. Donc il s'agit de faire des parcs industriels, d'augmenter le parc industriel pour que le travail soit moins pénible et pour attirer les gens pour venir donc travailler dans les plantations et les parcs. Voilà.
Merci.
Merci.
I think probably final question, maybe Dr. Marie-Noël, I don't know if you want to respond or whoever feels they want to speak about it. I think it's clear that there is a big funding gap here, but there's enormous potential. If the funding could be mobilized, what would that unlock for the continent? What's possible here, do you think?
Yes, thank you very much. Before we talk about what the gap we will fill, let us talk about the gap which actually exist here, yeah. Because we have a lot of gaps in Africa where you see that every day the population is growing, and you see that you have a problem of food insecurity, you have a problem of poverty. Of course, it's the mandate of the CG to overcome those problems, and also the mandate of all the organizations that we have. We have so many gaps. We need first to train, to have more human resources in Africa with good capacity, where there are some expertise, some discipline, where we still lack experts in the domain. Now we have been filling the gap in the breeding side, which is an important discipline, because when you want to improve the crop, you need to have breeders, right? So we had that gap, and in collaboration with the Rockefeller and Bill Gates, and the Africa Development Bank, the bank, have also invested that to really feed that gap. We also need to have to support our institution, national partner, because they are the key for the delivery of our innovations. So we need to support them, to build infrastructure, to have to retain the talent, so that to let the NAS partner, the partner in Africa, be able to work in good condition. So there are also so many gaps. Now in science, I'm a geneticist. We talk about sequencing of the gene plasma, sequencing of the material. We lack bioinformaticians in Africa. In Africa, not just there is a real lack of those expertise in Africa. So without those people, this expertise, you cannot take advantage of what the country in the north are doing. They are putting a lot of data on the database, but we need the expertise to exploit those data and apply them in breeding program and develop more resilient rice variety. So if I have to come back to your question, I think climate resilient, climate smart agriculture is the key, is something that we need to invest to fill that gap, because the climate action the climate changes are doing a clear disaster out there, and so we have to invest to develop climate smart agriculture technology. We also have to invest on nutrition to ensure that all the varieties that we are developing take into account the need, suit the need of the farmer in terms of the nutrition.
This really is the final question. Dr. Manek, if you had to, say in one sentence, the most important global action that could be taken to secure food systems in a changing climate, what would that be?
Susanna, thank you, but I think that's a very tough question. Because definitely, as we have been discussing, there is so much to be done and so many opportunities. So if at all we talk about the opportunities for investment in Africa, I had actually wanted to add a little to the last question, because definitely when you talk about the gaps, just allow me to talk a little bit, and then afterwards I come finally to this final question with regards to, yes. So the gaps, like she was mentioning, you have the technology gap. When you go to the farmer's field, you clearly see the technologies that most of the farmers are using and what research has as being available for the farmer. There's a big gap. So technology gap is there. You have the knowledge gap also, whereby a lot of our extension service agents, our scientists also in the national programs, the capacity that is required to be able to drive that level of development is not there. So we have that technology, and then also the knowledge gap, but infrastructure gap also. Because I mentioned that most of African agriculture is rain-fed. So, and we need to migrate more towards the irrigated. But just to give you an idea, to convert rain-fed land, lowland to irrigated lowland, for every hectare, that transition you need up to $10,000 per hectare. That means a heavy investment needs to come from somewhere. So that's the reason. So you have that, and infrastructure is an absolute must. The road networks also, and also the how do you call it, the land preparation, but then mechanization. We are talking about most of the African agriculture. A lot of it is also manual. So these are the reasons why the investment across the whole value chain, like we are talking about, there are huge gaps, but lots of opportunities. So that's the reason why, if you ask me one area where I can invest, definitely for me is the whole rice value chain. And then for me, the priority should be how can we invest in productivity increase over a short period of time? Because that's where the whole everything is going to lead to. Right now, all our production systems, be it animals, be it fisheries, be it crops, the productivity levels are too low in Africa. That's where we need to have the investments. Like I was mentioned by Dr. Samado, right? You have investments only in fertilizer and also seeds. Already you see a doubling of yields. So there are lots of opportunities, but once you focus on the target, which is the yield, we make sure that you say, okay, whatever production system we are talking about, is it going to be crops, livestock, everything, we make sure that our milk stock production for livestock is going to be increased. The beef production, everything is increased. So definitely for me, priority, let's focus on how to increase productivity across the hectareage in all the production systems. That should be really the priority for the continent. Thank you so much.
Susan, I don't have time, if I may. I want to reassure our partners that we will always be there. The African Development Bank will continue to support them. But no organization can do it alone. We are calling for partnership. The key word here, partnership. You are very welcome. Thank you.
That's a great way to finish. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience here and our audience online. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you to our panelists. And thank you very much to CGIAR, AfricaRice, and the African Development Bank for partnering with us on this very, very important discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.